Thanks very much to all of you for your remarks this afternoon. I would open the floor now to questions for any of our panelists. In the back, Stephen.
Yes, I have a question for John. Your presentation was about the mass cruise market, and at least in the European market, I'm thinking the Mediterranean around the British Isles, there's a move to much, much smaller vessels and a much high-end sort of experience, and obviously the cost is much higher to the passenger. Any thoughts about that kind of shift in the market in the sort of main Maritimes area?
Yeah, so, is this on? Okay. So, a couple things on that front. One interesting development is back in the days of the Queens, those vessels had very rigid class systems built into them, and so first class, second class, third class, steerage, whatever. You're seeing some of that reintroduced today, even on the largest vessels. So I was reading an article just the other day about the Norwegian Cruise Lines on one of their largest vessels has an area of the ship called the Haven. And apparently that's set aside only for passengers willing to pay a whole lot of money. Now, whether it makes a lot of sense to pay a whole lot of money to be on a really large cruise ship in a very, small segregated area, I don't know, it depends on what your interests are. But with respect to the smaller vessels, there are a lot of high-end small cruise brands out there, and some of them are much more appropriate to some of our smaller harbors. So, for instance, Rockland is emerging as a destination these days in the cruise business in Maine, and sort of small to medium-sized ships are probably more appropriate to that type of harbor, although they have accommodated some larger ships as well. So I see that definitely as a trend where you're seeing some smaller vessels finding smaller sized ports. So for instance, Camden here in Maine also sees cruise ship visitation. They get smaller vessels there. They tend, you're right, they tend to have a higher end clientele on board. Interestingly, with respect to the Arctic, the Crystal Serenity is going to make an Arctic voyage this coming summer, and it'll be the first large, quote-unquote, cruise ship going through the Northwest Passage, which should be an interesting trip, I would imagine. But when they say large in that context, that's 1,000 passengers, not 4,600 or 5,000.
Yes.
To what do you attribute the relative popularity of Bar Harbor against Portland as a cruise destination on the route from New York or Boston up through Canada? It would seem counterintuitive almost.
It's Acadia National Park, and that's the draw. It's an iconic port that is an important national park. It draws something close to 3 million visitors a year now, and so that is the draw there specifically. It is a small New England village, although not typical really of fishing villages anymore. So it has a unique draw. Portland, has a lot of things to commend itself as well, but very different experience, you're right, than what you get in Bar Harbor.
Yes.
Yeah, question for Lawrence. If the trade restrictions were lifted so that Maine could export shellfish to Europe, would time skip be a viable option for transporting live, let's say, oysters to France? Or is the vessel transport maybe a little bit too slow under the current infrastructure and then under the conceived holistic transport hub that Portland could become?
I don't know the lifetime of these products that you're talking about, but our transit time to Europe is 14 days.
Okay.
And we are moving refrigerated containers, whether they're cooled or frozen. And we are moving either full container loads or pallet in pallet quantities as well. So, yeah, we are an option for anything that can live longer than 14 days.
Thanks.
Live seafood generally goes by air freight.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Well, with that, I think I'll close the session because I know that we have a tour coming up of the Advanced Materials and Composites Center here. But just on behalf of our panel here, I want to thank you all for your attention and for being here today. And I hope everyone comes away from this conference with next actions and ideas for how we can get together again and collaborate. So thanks so much.